And in preparing that visit to Addis Ababa, I was having contact to Ethiopian students opposing Haile Selassie. I've met Eritrean students in Europe. And I saw the Ethiopian students, they were not shaking hands to Haile Selassie, they were just making like this 3 or 4 meters for His Majesty. And then I got in contact also with some taxi drivers, Eritrean taxi drivers in Addis Ababa, and I was chatting with them, and that one told me, I'm giving 1/3 of my salary to the Eritrean liberation. Our aim was to give humanitarian assistance to the Eritrean people in need. This is one thing, and the other aim was to inform about the Eritrean independence struggle, because at that time in '77 almost nobody in Switzerland knew anything about the conflict and about Eritrea.
Eyewitness of the Eritrean Revolution. I'm presenting you today Dr. Tony Locher is a Swiss-born doctor who was interested in politics from a young age. It was his interest in liberation movements that had taken Tony to Eritrea in the late 1970s. Ever since then, he has not just taken a keen interest in Eritrea, but has provided material to help. In 1978, he had gathered 2 large trucks full of medical supplies and had organized the delivery of medical supplies himself. What is remarkable about this is that he and his colleagues drove all the way from Switzerland to Eritrea, having gone through Italy, Egypt, and Sudan to deliver the much-needed medical supplies to the EPLF. I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Tony Locher, who was most willing to share his experiences of Eritrea.
ጉድምባር ተገሩ ኣብ ቀርና ኣፍሪቃ ብዙሕ ዝቋንቋን ንደርጊ ደገፋ ግርምቢጣ ወኺዳን ንምድምሳስ ሰውራ ፍሉይ ተመኩሮ ናይ ሜዳ ኤርትራ ሆይ ናይ ሜዳ ኤርትራ ጉድምባር ተገሩ ናብ ቀርኒ ኣፍሪቃ ብዙሕ ዝቋንቋን ንደርጊ ደገፋ ግርምቢጣ ወኺዳን ንምድምሳስ ሰውራ ፍሉይ ተመኩሮ ናይ ሜዳ ኤርትራ ሆይ ናይ ሜዳ ኤርትራ ነዊሕ ምቅርራብ ወፍሪ ቀይሕ ኮኸብ
Yes, I was born in the southern part of Switzerland. I was from a poor family, and during my education I came in contact with Catholic missionaries. They're called White Fathers, and this was my first interest to Africa. I should be according to my parents, I should go to Africa as a missionary. And finally, I became a doctor, gynecologist. And during my student time, I got in contact with Eritrea. During my student time, it was the 68 student movement. I was in contact with different liberation movements in Southern Africa, the former Portuguese colonies, with ANC from South Africa. And then in 1970, I got in contact with the Eritrean liberation struggle. At that time, I was going to Addis Ababa to follow a conference of the Worldwide Federation of Christian Students. This was the time of Haile Selassie, and then I met some Eritrean students attending the conference there. So this was my first contact. I was very much linked to the very well-known liberation movements in Southern Africa, Frelimo, PAIGC, MPLA and ANC. But then suddenly I discovered ELF, EPLF. This was very new for me, it was different. After, in this time of 68, 70, the former liberation movements became government, and they were linked to, some of them were linked to the Soviet Union. And for me it was so astonishing, some of them with China, with Mao Zedong and so on. But for me, that there was a very independent, self-reliant liberation movement, not very well known in the outside world. This was very special. So especially in 1970 I got interested in this special type of liberation movement, which was the Eritrean movements at that time, ELF and EPLF. After my trip to Addis Ababa and to shake hands to Haile Selassie, I went back to Switzerland, and then I got in contact with the foreign representation of the liberation movements, and especially the foreign representation of EPLF. I was especially interested in EPLF. There was this time of the infight between ELF and EPLF. But then I was really interested in EPLF, and so through the foreign mission of EPLF, the people who represented EPLF in Europe, I could visit the field in July 1977. This was a wonderful time. We just in July, beginning of July, we went from the lowlands, from Sahel up to Afabet. It was just a few days after the first liberation of Keren. So I was with Sebat Ephraim in Keren going up and down the liberated Keren just a few days after that. Then we went up to El Abared and near to Asmara, to Woke Zager. And we could see the outskirts of Asmara, and we were thinking Eritrea will be soon liberated in a few days. Of course, it was a little bit more difficult. The Soviet Union was engaged on the Ethiopian side, and then, of course... But this was my first trip. I was especially interested in the health system because I'm a doctor. So I went to the Keren hospital, which was more or less destroyed during the fightings. The Ethiopians were dropping bombs and so on. But really, within a few days, EPLF was organizing beside the hospital the ambulatory services. There were a lot of wounded fighters, wounded civilian people. So I was astonished. It was very, very well organized. With a few materials, they started to give inpatient, outpatient services to the people, to the wounded people. So this was very, I saw, of course, during my first trip, I've been also to the Oroto Base Hospital, which was also very well organized. But after to see EPLF's creativity after 2-3 days after this liberation of Keren to see the medical service working. This was very impressive. In Keren, because Keren was a little bit more influenced by ELF at that time, it was an ELF stronghold, but still Sebad was very friendly with the people. We went there to the streets and so on. But then we went up to Elaborate and then especially to Zagar. Zagar was a very famous village at that time because the infight between EPLF and ELF at that time was more or less not solved, but the Zagar population was forcing the fronts to find a solution, to find a common solution. So Zagar was very famous for that. It was an EPLF stronghold, and then we went down to Filfil, Zabur, Filfil, and so on. So, of course, I witnessed the social revolution of EPLF during that time in 1977, how they were organizing the health system in the base areas, in the field, in Meda, but also near to the Central Highland, or also in Filfil, how they managed. That was very interesting for me to see not only the military part of the independence movements, the liberation struggle, but also the social revolution in the country. Yeah, this was a special time. I mean, everybody, especially after the liberation of Keren in July 1977, everybody was thinking the next step is to enter Asmara and to liberate Asmara. And everybody was very optimistic. Then we went down to Filfil and then back to but unfortunately, times were changing, and this was always like this in the history. You have some setbacks, you have some good progress, but of course in July 1977 we were very optimistic that the liberation struggle would soon be ending and Eritrea would be free. And then I witnessed, of course, also the strategic retreat after that. When Soviet Union was starting to be engaged on the Ethiopian side with Mengistu. And then I was there in the middle of 1978. And after having witnessed the liberation of Keren, it was very sad to see the evacuation of Keren in 1978. It was a very, very well organized strategic retreat. EPLF brought everything from Keren, the infrastructure they needed to rebuild the infrastructure in the liberated area in Nakfa at that time I was in Afromet. When during the night time the trucks came from Keren, brought all the medical equipment they took from the hospital. They took it back to the base area, to the Meda. It was a very, very difficult step, and I felt it. I mean, there was no chaos. It was very well organized, and I was really astonished. I felt more sad about it, and I said, "Oh, it's so terrible to see now." After I saw the optimistic view during the liberation of Keren and near Asmara, to see them coming back from these towns which were liberated, and we were hoping that Eritrea would be soon a free country. But then in Afromet, this was sad. I felt very sad. But although it was so well organized, I was really astonished. I mean, the Ethiopian troops were following them from Keren, but still, I mean, the people were not happy, of course, but it was well organized, and there was no other chance. I think any other liberation movement that would have gone into disaster or chaos and so on. But this was very impressive to see the EPLF, this well-organized strategic retreat. Yeah, it was a strategic, decision of EPLF in order to survive. I mean, EPLF had no foreign assistance. Nobody cared about them, either whether any of the big powers. And I remember one representative of the International Red Cross, ICRC, was during the strategic retreat. He was in the field, and he was telling me, "Forget about EPLF. They cannot survive. It's for sure. I will go to the outside world and tell the people the Eritrean struggle is finished." So it was a strategic decision to survive in front of this very massive attack of the Ethiopian troops, supported especially by the Soviet Union. So this was the only possibility to survive, and it was a very well organized survival march. When we came back from that trip into the field, because the humanitarian situation, of course, was especially then in '78 and so on, it was very difficult. So we focused more on the humanitarian side. Of course, we made also information campaigns, writing articles, doing media work. But in Sucre, the Swiss Support Committee for Eritrea, it was created in October '77. We more focused on the humanitarian situation in Eritrea. So especially after the strategic retreat and in '83, '84 with the hunger situation, the big hunger in Ethiopia and also affected Eritrea. So we were mainly focusing to reach humanitarian aid for the people in the liberated areas. This was, of course, Eritrea was not known at all. I mean, the Eritrean struggle, so we had to do small steps, and this was very good because at that time already there was a small Eritrean diaspora in Switzerland. And with these few Eritrean friends, we started to do street campaigns during winter. Before Christmas, we were freezing on the streets of Zurich to collect money to help the people in Eritrea. Of course, we did both. We asked for humanitarian help, which was a little bit easier, especially in '84, '85, and the big hunger was very well known in Western media. But we also tried to inform Swiss people about what was going on in Eritrea, not only in the humanitarian field, but also what the EPLF was. After the strategic retreat, the life in the liberated areas continued. They started to build infrastructure, this famous Rota hospital. And I was, of course, especially interested in what EPLF was doing in the health sector. I met Dr. Abrehet, the gynecologist. I met Dr. Nerayo, Dr. Mikhail, all these very famous doctors who did their work in the liberated areas. And slowly, I was attending the congresses of Eritrean Relief Association. And slowly then I saw the progress after that strategic retreat, slowly, how EPLF could survive and becoming stronger and turning I was there then almost every year. I went to the field to see the progress in the liberated areas and the military progress. Especially I was there during the second EPLF Congress in 1987. This was a very impressive event. And we slowly saw that the assistance or the support from other liberation movements was becoming stronger. At the Congress there were different liberation movements present, PLO, different Palestinian movements, the Oromo Liberation Front was there and so on. So slowly EPLF could consolidate their strengths in the MEDA and start to push back. This was a project in order also to raise a little public publicity, because this was something special at that time. Eritrea was not known at all, and then we bought 2 old military lorries in Germany, brought them to Switzerland, made the repair work, put different relief goods on it, went through Italy, put them on a ship to Alexandria, to Egypt, went the whole Nile up to Aswan, and went through the Nubian desert to Sudan, to Port Sudan. We drove them there, and of course we made a little bit of publicity for Eritrea in Switzerland with that, but also it was a sign of solidarity to bring relief goods in these difficult times of strategic critique, to bring relief goods in solidarity with the Eritrean people, to bring the relief goods to Port Sudan and then to Eritrea. This was a symbolic act of solidarity. Two professional drivers, and yes, it was an adventure. We were quite young at this time, so it was also an adventure. We got lost in the Nubian desert. It was a war there between Israel and Egypt. It was just in these difficult times, so we got lost in the Nubian desert. But finally we could find a way to Sudan and Port Sudan. So it was an adventure, but it was after we came back, we could tell the media about this trip, and it was we could raise some awareness and some solidarity with Eritrea.
أخديمة أبسي تاريخاوي أكيبا مسخوم بهانسا مهبالي أبي تخكواسن هبنن يسمياني اللو كمون كتيلة بزو يه مسكنخوم أبسي ناتسا تسخونة هجركم بمركبي ماليا تسيبلو أبي دستا كمسمياني كمزلو إنه إزي تاريخاوي أكيبا نمبال أدلاي سلسخونة بهانسا نبلو إنابلكو سرباي ياتسو إدمي نهسباوي كنبار هانت إريترا أوت نافاش.
I've experienced, even during these difficult times of strategic retreat in Alphabet in 78, then 80, 82, 83, 84, all these offensives of the Ethiopian army, I was not always on the front line. I was a little bit scared. I saw the MiG flying over the the guest house, this was enough for me. I witnessed the war, of course, but I felt the strength of the EPLF, and I never doubted that they would survive. The most difficult time for me was in Afabet during the strategic retreat. I was thinking, oh, this will be a very, very difficult time for EPLF. But then during the 80s, even during the six offensives, I never had a doubt that because after the good thing of the strategic retreat was that they could really build up their strengths in the liberated areas. This was in all the fields of education, of health, and the military sector, and so on. And I witnessed this, so for me it was clear they would survive and gain again the upper hand. I witnessed several times during smaller or bigger offensives. The EPLF was very well organized. They had their frontline doctors. They made the first line treatment of the wounded EPLF fighters. But then I also witnessed the surgeons in the hospital, the big hospital, Roda underground hospital, and they were working day and night if it was necessary. I was really astonished. I was working in Switzerland also one year as a surgeon, then I became a gynecologist. But and I know the situation. If you have to if you do deliveries at night and you have to do operations at daytime. But they were very astonishing. Dr. Michael, he had classical music in his earphones, and they were sleeping 1 hour, and then he started again to treat the wounded. So, but then also sometimes there was a time to relax and so on. So it was a good time to witness this engagement of the Eritrean doctors. I was especially impressed by Babu, the famous Tanzanian Africanist, and he was. I was telling Tigrinya, my Tigrinya was not very good at all. I had a chance to tell you. But I was telling the people that I'm very proud to be there during this very important second EPLF Congress, and that Eritrea is an example for Africa. With my experience with a lot of African liberation movements, I told the people during the night time, Eritrea's EPLF is an example for an African liberation struggle, really. So. And we felt in '87, we felt that we would be successful at the end of the day. The atmosphere was very good. There was this Union Congress between ELF-CC and EPLF, and there were famous people there like Otto Moldeab, very famous. I was really touched by his presence at that time, and I was still quite very young, but I felt this was a very decisive Congress for the continuation of the liberation struggle. I think it's the whole concept of EPLF. If you compare it, Babu could also compare because he's a very well-known African leader in New Nyerere from Tanzania, one of the good African leaders promoting this Ujamaa, African socialism. And then he could compare, when he came to Eritrea, it was like me, I was surprised. I knew a lot about all the African movements. And then to come to Eritrea, which was not known at all at the time, and to see what they realized. And this is part of the Eritrean culture, I think. Not to tell everybody a lot of stories, but to realize the liberation struggle in concrete terms, and to realize at the same time and in a parallel movement to this social revolution, the liberation of women and all these things. Before the capture of Alphabet, this famous battle, I got married in the field. So I was very happy. This was a symbolic act also. We went there I think in February of '88 with my former wife. She passed away. And during night time there were MiGs flying above the Orota region. We got married in the field, and we had a very wonderful night fiesta there. So of course I was anyhow happy to have married in the field. And this was symbolic because a non-Eritrean or a Swiss man like me going to get married in the field, this was a little symbol of solidarity also between Swiss people and Eritrean people, because wedding is a very important cultural thing in Eritrea. And EPLF at that time even they told the people not to have too big weddings, to have very small weddings. And this wedding in the field was very small, nice night wedding, and so I was happy to have witnessed this in the field. And many years later on, people are asking me, how was the wedding in the field? Told them, yes. I was dressed as a lowlander, my former wife was dressed as a highlander, so it was the cultural group of troop of the EPLF was playing, and so it was very nice. And then of course Alphabet and the following, this was a decisive battle then. I mean, I'm not a specialist in liberation struggles, but it was really decisive. Somebody called, I think Babu called it the Gambian flu of Eritrea. So then of course 88 and 89 we were waiting for. We were always in Bologna during the summertime. This was my summer vacation program. I went to Bologna to the festival, and we were telling each other always, see you next year in Asmara. This was the signal of hope, and of course 88, 89, then we felt that the strength of EPLF is growing and that Eritrea will be liberated. Of course, we were waiting for it, we were hoping for it, but when it became reality, it was too much. I went up to the roof of my building in Switzerland, of my clinic, and I was waving EPLF flag. I was completely alone, nobody was with me. I stood on the roof and I was waving the flag, the EPLF flag. So, of course, after that, we had many celebrations, and I was very happy to go to Eritrea then in September 91. First time to go to the liberated Eritrea. This was, of course, wonderful experiences. Of course, Suke was continuing then, because the nation building, the reconstruction, the nation building process, it was Eritrea was at the beginning, but there was a lot of destruction in the country, and this time it was not only the MEDA we were supporting, but now it's the whole country. So we started to continue to support different projects, especially in the field of water. with support of the Swiss government, after the liberation it was much easier to get support from other NGOs, from big NGOs and from the government. We started to, Eritrea started to build the Areza Dam, then the big Somomo Dam in 94, 95. So we were a little bit, this was the wish of the Eritrean community and the Eritrean government to build dams. Today Eritrea is full of dams. We have every year we have new dams like the one in Gatelai, the Logo Dam, and all these dams in the Western Lowlands. At that time there were very few of them, but at that time already the government started to build dams to save every drop of water, to improve the situation in the agriculture. So these dams in Areza and in the Semowa Dam, this was with the help of Suke that we... Yes, this is a very basic issue. I think if somebody has seen during the liberation struggle how EPLF was treating the prisoners of war, there were many of them. So this is fulfilling basic human rights. I was always telling the people in the 91 to 98 and then especially after the Second War, when these human rights issues became so publicized and sensitive, and then later on with the Special Rapporteur and the Human Rights Council in Geneva, I was always telling the people, I can tell you some stories about how EPLF was treating the prisoners of war. The prisoners of war got better food than the fighters sometimes. I've witnessed that. I've been several times to these camps. They were open camps. Everybody could go away if they. But and I was also there with some people from ICRC, and they have witnessed it, and but later on they didn't explain it to the Human Rights Council. But this was for me how if you treat your enemies like this, and Eritrean people and EPLF was suffering a lot from these 6 offensives, and later on also. So if you treat the prisoners of war like this is for me the basic experience about human rights situation in Eritrea. I'm very happy for me the most important thing in the recent 2, 3, 4 years was the peace process. With Ethiopia it was so it was again like during liberation in 91, was this in June of 2018, when during the Martyrs' Day the president was telling us that there will be peace between the two peoples. It was so it's like, if you're a little bit old like me, then you feel sometimes like Moses to see the land, the land you wish that it would be, and this was the fulfillment of a big wish for me also, to see this peace process in the Horn of Africa, not only with Ethiopia but also with Sudan, with Somalia, with Djibouti. So it was another time of hope that the peoples in the Horn of Africa, the countries will find a good solution for their conflicts and have peace now. And I think if I see the president in this Millennium Hall, when he had his speech in Amharic, his few words in Amharic, I was so happy. And I think he was also happy. And after a very, very long time of struggle, of difficult things like the strategic retreat, of years of patience. I needed also. I mean, the people in the field, they were much more engaged. Of course, I was in free Europe, and I was not in danger concerning my life. But still, I feel that I'm very happy that the nation-building process is going on, even if it's sometimes slow and even if you need some patience. But this peace process, for me, it's the most important thing in the recent years.
I hope this will be the last relief distribution here in Upper Bay. I hope really that peace will come in Eritrea and that it will be no more necessary to have such relief distributions in the future, because Eritrea wants to go this way of self-reliance and not to be dependent on foreign relief. So this is my biggest hope, that there will be peace in the future in Eritrea and that no foreign force will any time try to occupy again your country, which is also my beloved second home country, our Nafash.
Yeah, after of course this is a new phenomenon. This is the migration issue. I mean, migration from Africa towards Europe. This is nothing new, and it's growing and growing. And so the migration of young Eritreans coming to Switzerland was quite important. I mean, important because it's the majority of migrants coming to, or refugees coming to Switzerland are Eritreans. So this was influencing, having some impacts on the Swiss internal policy. And so we were thinking from Suke, we were always saying it's better to help, to give some support to the Eritrean development, nation building process, and not to bring young Eritreans to Switzerland where the integration process is very difficult for them. It has improved a little bit, but still it's very difficult. And we thought it's better that they could stay and find jobs and participate in the nation building process in Eritrea. So we went with some members of the parliament to Eritrea so they could witness the real situation in the country. And after that, the government changed a little bit their policy, and they started to support a project of the National Union of Eritrean Workers, NCW, in Massawa. This is a project of vocational training. So this is at the moment the biggest Suke project, and it's supported by the Swiss government. So the relationship between Switzerland, Swiss government, Eritrean government, Eritrean trade union has improved. And I think this is also for Suke the good way of solidarity, concrete, to work together with trade union, with Hamade, with the women's union, in order to give solidarity in concrete terms, in terms of projects, in this long way of nation building in Eritrea. Getting a little bit older, a little bit weaker, and still continuing. I mean, this was a wonderful trip in 2014. Peace, in Eritrea there was always peacetime. We felt very secure in this country. And with a whole group of Suke and EHD, we went to all over the country, getting in contact with our local partners. And the highlight, we went to Adihalo to see the president there and speaking with him. So this was, I've seen the president many times during that long period. It's now almost 50 years for me. But this was a special event, and we felt very grateful that he was with us for a few hours. Thank you. Oh, now fast.